I was just sitting here and looking out behind, and it's just so gorgeous, isn't it? The flowers, and it's just God's beauty just shining as our backdrop. It's wonderful. Ernest Holmes wrote this about the form of prayer that we teach called spiritual mind treatment or treatment. Always come to a complete conclusion when giving a treatment. Always feel that it is done, complete, and perfect, giving thanks for the answer as if it were already objectified. Each treatment should be repeated daily until a healing takes place. If it takes 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, or 5 years, the treatment must be kept up until a healing is accomplished. That's from Science of Mind, page 224 to 225. Using the creative power of our spoken word, we can transform our subconscious mind and therefore our lives. Let's do that now. Say with me this affirmation. As I pray, I look beyond the appearance and expand my consciousness to feel, to realize the allness and perfection of spirit, which is closer to me than my own breath. This feeling of oneness or allness is the creative power that is now turning my words into a bright new experience.
So I've been inspired deeply by what we've been learning in the metaphysical Bible class, and so I'm wanting to share some of that beautiful wisdom that comes through the master teacher Jesus, known as the parables, and also to have you join with me in the deep appreciation of what these parables teach us about the laws of mind, about our inner world, the inner realm, the invisible aspect of ourselves that is infinite and expansive and ever unfolding. So I want to share with you the parable of the wedding robe, or the parable of the wedding feast. You could call it either one. And this is the story. The story is that Jesus says the kingdom of heaven, which he always tells us is within us, it's not some far off place. The kingdom of heaven is within. And he says the kingdom of heaven, then, that is within us is like a king who decided to put on an amazing wedding feast for his son. And so then what he did is he sent out his servants to invite those who were part of the guests that were to be invited. And so the servants went out, and they were met with people who said, well, I don't really have time for that right now. I'm too busy watching TV. I don't have time for that. I have this business that I have to run. I don't have time for that because, whatever it is, I have to clear up what's going on in the past, or I have to think about my past. It goes on and on and on, but I think you're getting the gist of it. And then there were the others that basically said, when the kingdom of heaven, the invitation to this wedding feast was offered, who basically killed the servants, who just and mocked the servants and said, that's a silly idea. Why waste your time, going within to the kingdom of heaven? It's a waste. I have other things to do in the world, and so the servants that did make it came back and said, these people would not accept the invitation, and so the king sent out another group of servants to other people in the streets, anybody they could find, really, people who were down and out and were having challenges in their lives, and so many of these people said yes. And so they came to the wedding feast, and they were filled. They were filled. And so the final statement that Jesus, oh wait, there's one more piece that's really important. And there was also one of the wedding guests showed up in improper attire. It was not wedding attire. And so this particular guest was thrown out, was bound and thrown out. So the thing that we must realize, oh, and then let me end. And so Jesus ended by saying, many are called, but few are chosen. Rocco Errico, in looking at the deeper meaning, it's many are called, few choose. Few choose. Many are called, few choose. So let's unpack this beautiful parable because it has a lot to say about what spiritual mind treatment, our form of prayer, is really all about. So the king stands for the king of life. You could call it the presence of God that resides everywhere and within us. That's the king. The son, that's all of us. That's the divine within all of us, the wedding feast for the son. And all of the guests, all of those guests represent our attitudes, our ways of approaching life. So the guests who were saying, no, I'm too busy. I think many of us can recognize that when it's time to do our spiritual practice or time to go and be with our spiritual community. We can make up all kinds of excuses why we shouldn't be here or why we shouldn't do our spiritual practice. And so it's to be aware that every time that we sit in community, that we sit in spiritual practice, we are sitting at the feast of the kingdom of heaven. How good is that? And then there are those who basically scorn the whole idea of wasting time sitting in the silence, and make fun of it and think it's silly, and anything that has to do with going within is like a waste of my time, because wow, after all, the thing that's really happening is just all this stuff in the physical world, not realizing that the physical world comes from the inner world. So our inner world is of prime importance. It's spiritual supremacy is within us. The very cause and the source of our lives, which is our thought world. So sitting at the feast, and then the guest that had the improper garment relates to those who do show up at the feast but haven't done their forgiveness work, right? That hold grudges, that blame, that hold guilt, maybe blame themselves, that haven't done that inner work, that cleansing within, to allow to have the ability to partake of the amazing feast of life. So that feast of life, often we think, okay, it's all the material things. Well, that's the things that are added after we do the inner work. But what we're talking about here, this feast, is a feast of inner strength in times when we feel weak or we feel not strong. It's a source of inner strength. It's a source of courage, a source of love, a source of peace, a source of answers to all of the challenges that we have in our lives, a source of answers right there within us. Everything we could ever want or desire already within. That's the kingdom of heaven within. That's the wedding feast. And why a wedding feast? Because when we wed ourselves to the silence, to listening within, when we wed ourselves to that, and we wed ourselves to our deepest desires, that's divine union. That allows us to then be the consciousness from which our dreams are born. Yes? Yes. So, what does this have to do with spiritual mind treatment, right? It has everything to do with spiritual mind treatment. Spiritual mind treatment, our form of prayer, is not begging or pleading or petitioning God. It is a statement of truth You've heard our practitioners when they pray, they state the truth. It's a truth. It's a treatment for the mind. It's treating the mind in higher truth. It's helping to clear the mind of all falsehood, all false beliefs. It truly is a beautiful method of moving ourselves from our normal beta wave brain state. Did I say that right? Beta brain wave state, which is separation. It's the consciousness of separation in our normal everyday state, to the alpha state and the deeper states, maybe theta and so on, that where we have access to this awareness of union and oneness and wholeness and a sea of ideas and possibilities and potentialities. It helps us move into those deeper states. And how does it do that? Okay, recognition. Think about recognition. Recognition is telling ourselves the truth about this universal intelligence and presence that we live, move, and have our being in. And it doesn't matter what we call this presence, Great Spirit, God, the all that is, the Allah, the infinite light, eternal light, universal intelligence, universal mind. These are all beautiful descriptors that we can treat our minds with to know that this greater reality from which we come is infinite, expansive, unlimited, and full of every answer that we could ever desire, all the strength, love, courage, and goodness that we could ever imagine in the invisible realms. So that awareness of this universal presence of God, that's the recognition stage. Recognizing the truth about the one source. And then unification. I am one with that presence. I am that life individualized. I am that source ever unfolding. Within me is the kingdom of heaven. Within me is the source of pure potentiality and possibility. Within me is every good thing I could ever imagine in the form of ideas. Ideas are spiritual coin. That's the currency of spirit. And so within me, so as I embrace that and I know who I am in truth, that is in meditation. Contemplating that moves us out of beta into alpha and theta, those higher states of consciousness. And now we're ready to do realization, which is to speak and claim our good. I claim my good as whatever it might be: vibrant, radiant health, financial well being, loving, beautiful, sweet relationships with people that I absolutely love and adore, and an ability to hold the higher truth of those who yet don't know who they are, whatever that good might be. The ability that I have everything within me necessary to now give my gifts to the planet. How good is that? So the realization, claiming our good and talking about how we share that good, not only receive it, but share it. And then the final parts of spiritual mind treatment, I give thanks. I give thanks that it's already done. I give thanks for my shift in consciousness, my alignment with truth, my alignment with my good. And I release my word then into the universal law of mind. I trust that there is a law of mind. I mean, this is what Jesus and the many great masters all over the planet teach us, that there are laws of the mind. And it's what we focus on is what we get. Our thoughts are seeds that we plant in the fertile soil of universal mind, and they produce according to the seeds that we plant, whatever kinds of thoughts that we tend to focus on. So then what? Okay, so you see the connection. Spiritual mind treatment helps us partake of the wedding feast, helps us partake of the kingdom of heaven consciousness, all the good that is available to us. It actually walks us through it. It prepares our consciousness to be the fertile soil of the good that we desire. Okay, this idea of completion. The reason why we say make every treatment complete is because we want to convince ourselves and have the strong conviction that what we are planting in the universal soil or creative medium of universal mind, or we could call it the subconscious mind because our subconscious mind is part of the greater mind, is taking root and growing. And every prayer, every treatment that comes after that until there's a demonstration is all about clearing the way in our consciousness so that beautiful idea in the mind of God, the great sower of seeds, the seed that we caught, the seeds that we catch and we plant, every treatment after that is really not about focusing necessarily on the thing that we're planting, but on how to get ourselves out of the way, our conditioned mind actually out of the way so that we can partake of that goodness. Yeah, yeah. And so when people ask the question, what is it? How do I know when my treatment is complete? The evidence, if you're treating for a reduction in your blood pressure, the evidence that your treatment has worked is that blood pressure is now where you would like it to be. If you're treating for a greater financial well-being, well, you pray until you have the evidence of it. And here's another aspect that I want to share with you because I've watched this before. I've witnessed this. So you're doing your spiritual mind treatments, and then or somebody has been treating with you and for you, and you suddenly realize that whatever you've been treating for has been made manifest. But then you might attribute it to, well, it's because I went to that workshop over there, or it's because I went to my chiropractor, or okay. So remember that everything starts as an idea. Everything starts as an idea. And so if you're guided to go here, to go there, and you have a demonstration, it's still a result of a change of consciousness that was planted within. So the reason why this is really important is because until we realize that the causal realm is within us, then we're going to be continue to look for some external thing out there to fix us. So it's important that we claim that everything that is showing up in our lives is a result of a change of heart, a change of thinking that's taking place in us. One of the ways to do that is to keep a prayer log, to write down whenever you do a spiritual mind treatment and you get a result, to actually put it down. Say, thus and such a date, this is what happened. We did that during my practitioner training years ago, back in the 1990s. And it was powerful for me because even though things may not show up right away, they might show up a week later, or they might show up 2 weeks later, or whatever. But the demonstrations, which means when we have evidence that the treatment has worked, when I recorded all of those, and there were lots of them, I finally realized this prayer this method of prayer is powerful. Issues that I had had for years were clearing up. And when I was a practitioner, I was watching other people's lives change too. And I had a great knowing that when I prayed with someone, it may not show up immediately. That's fine. But I knew that with time, that there would be would be change in people, and particularly when they get really engaged in their own inner world, that take the time to meditate and pray themselves and take classes and so on. So there are laws of mind. There is a whole inner world, an inner realm from which this reality arises. And we take care of ourselves. We sit at the wedding feast of life, that kingdom of heaven, every time we practice spiritual mind treatment. So I say yes to this. I invite us all to say yes to it together. Yes, and so it is.